And thanks, guys, for that first carrier update this morning. We'll have a ton more chances to catch up with them today during FreightWaves Now, and of course today during Freightonomics, also after this show. Right now, we're going to welcome our air cargo editor, Eric Coolish, to the show. Eric, thank you for joining us on this Thursday morning.
My pleasure. Glad to be here, Kaylee.
Great to have you as always, and let's dig right into it. We've got a ton to get through today, so starting off with the freighter conversion bonanza. And has it gone a step too far?
Yeah, I mean, I come on this show a lot, and I'm always reporting about, new freighter deals, whether they're from the factory, from Boeing, primarily for a new freighter, or mostly, conversions, taking a used passenger plane, cutting a hole in the side, doing a whole bunch of other remodeling to able to, put containers on the main deck and convert them. And so there's just been a, seeming explosion of these over time. And so in the last couple of years, especially since pandemic. And so I saw a couple reports in the last week or so, and checked with some folks, and some of these analysts are raising questions. Could we, reach a point pretty soon where there's overcapacity? We're building too many of these. But the reason behind this push is obviously, just the explosion in e-commerce and just all the PPE and all the other supply chain disruptions that have created, and all the demand from consumers that have just created this demand now for air cargo. And so, question is, how long will that last? And obviously, there's a shortage of air cargo capacity, so everyone wants planes. But just like in trucking, how exuberant do you get? If you put too many in, next down cycle, you're in a world of hurt. So just to give you an example, and this phenomenon, and the critique is mostly in the narrow body area. So, your standard like 737 type of aircraft that's used for kind of regional and short haul type of transportation, where there's competition also with trucking. And so that's where the biggest concern is, because the values of those planes have come up over time since the pandemic, as more planes have, more passenger airlines have gone into service again. But the wide bodies, the big ones that fly internationally, their values are still down 40%. So, there's less concern there of overcapacity. But with these narrow bodies, just to give you an example, pre-pandemic, they were, let me look at the numbers here. There were about 30 years ago, about 50 of these were made. Then in the last decade, about 70 per year. And then in the past year, or by 2025, they think it'll be about 180 of these planes per year. So it'll crest then, and if it'll dip down some by mid-decade. Otherwise, we'll have some oversupply. But even then, it'll be at still kind of record production levels. So it's just an interesting dynamic, and it's mostly in that kind of 737 range.
It is an interesting dynamic, Eric, and one of my question that comes to mind is, if we've got this excess capacity, which we probably do, because the economy didn't double in size, it was artificially exploded, right? It was going to come down regardless. I mean, anybody who thought it was going to just stay at this incredibly high level, they're fooling themselves. But how does this affect the belly cargo moving forward? If you've got this excess capacity on these freighters, does this make it more difficult for the passenger traditional, like your Delta, your United, and your Americans, to get in on and come back to that belly cargo as they open up their passenger lanes as well?
I mean, obviously it would affect the entire market. If there's overcapacity, everyone's going to have lower yields and trouble, filling those planes the way they would like. But, I don't think there's a concern of overcapacity, in the very near term, coming out of the recession, or, the COVID recession, so to speak. There's plenty of need still. And, it's kind of more like when we get to 2025, 2026. And so, whether we'll have freighters, whether we'll have overcapacity. I think there's some, you have to balance some of this, because there's some longer term trends that could still make the freighters super valuable. I mean, e-commerce is going away, not going away. It's growing exponentially. So, especially with these express carrier routes where you need these milk shuttle runs, these 737s and the Airbus A321, they're perfect planes and will be in high demand. Second, the ocean carriers, the manufacturers like Boeing and Airbus really cut back on producing large wide body passenger planes in the last couple of years. It's like half of what it was in 2019. Meanwhile, you've had fleets, 747 fleets and older wide bodies like the A330 and A380 being, retired by many airlines. So there's been kind of a loss in that area that may not be quickly made up. So you could need freighters for a good while. So it's a matter of finding that balance and if it all how it all works out.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Eric, let's move on to our second story of the morning. We talked about this yesterday in headlines, UPS getting caught kind of fudging their numbers, and now they're having to pay the price for it. And I think this is interesting because it seems like something that you wouldn't necessarily expect out of a company like UPS, but they were trying to honor their on-time delivery, right, by falsifying barcode scans.
Right. So they had a contract to pick up from a bunch of locations, a handful of locations, plus defense, military installations overseas, State Department installations, and then deliver those packages in mail for the U.S. Postal Service. And they, were paid or got, a better price or, got bonuses or whatever by on-time delivery. And so if they were, I guess, late for some reason or weren't performing, they were fudging the barcode scans to be able to still earn that, contract money. So they didn't admit any fault, and they just settled to clear this off their books, they said, and they also remain a U.S. Postal Service contractor. So, and it should be noted that they're not the only one who got caught up in this. They're like the fifth airline, and their fine is relatively on the small end. United Airlines a year and a half ago paid $49 million for the same allegation or charge, and American Airlines paid $22 million. So UPS has kind of got more of a slap on the wrist here or settled. But it's unfortunate, and I'm sure there was some dispute over how the people define the timestamps.
Yeah, I'm sure there were. The war here, Ukraine, Russia, is still having impact on air cargo. Can you get into that a little bit?
Yeah, it's one of those things, just showing how, the ripple effects and how we're all interconnected. And, some of the latest issues are, as the U.S. and 36 other countries have banned Russian aircraft from their airspace and airports, and Russia retaliated similarly. So that's causing a lot of complications. You have to reroute around Russia to get to Asia, extra costs as we've talked about. But on Friday, it was interesting. The U.S. Commerce Department and the European governments, put out a warning or reminded companies that, not only do we close the airspace, but we put export controls on, technology and software and parts and any other support for any airplane that's owned, Boeing or Airbus made or, made in the West that's supported by those types of components that you cannot provide, so there's export controls, you can't send them. And anyone who helps an airline or an aircraft that's under the sanctions list, could get caught up in secondary sanctions. And that means so if those planes are in country X and want to fly back to Russia, you can't refuel them. You can't, give them a little extra repair or provide some navigation help, because then if we find out, you could be in trouble. And then Bermuda and Ireland revoked or suspended their airworthiness certificates for hundreds of aircraft that are registered in those countries that are owned and operated by Russians. So that effectively, made it impossible for a lot of Russian carriers to fly. And so you saw Airbridge Cargo, which is a subsidiary of Volga Dnieper, a Russian cargo company. Airbridge Cargo has a large fleet of about 17 or 18 747 jumbo jet freighters, and they just basically have shut down for the duration of the war. They may be out of business forever. So that's one of the impacts. You're seeing Antonov Airlines, which had these Antonov super jumbo jet Russian-made freighters. They're just flying some of their Ukrainian company. They're just being used now for humanitarian flights into Ukraine. So they're kind of off the market. And basically rates are up about 25% at least, and fuel costs are up. So just the ripple effects are everywhere.
Absolutely, and we're going to keep watching those ripple effects as we continue to watch the conflict unfold. Eric, thank you for joining us this morning. Always great to have you, and we'll catch up next week.
Anytime, guys. Have a good day.